Hey everybody, welcome to Preservation Greensboro's series, Guilford at 250, which is celebrating the fact that Guilford County is now 250 years old, which is quite an accomplishment for our history. We've got an incredibly deep and diverse history, and that is what we're celebrating, especially as our history relates to our built environment. So we're tonight will be the eighth in our series of history perspectives relative to our built environment. If you've seen past presentations, they have related to different religious groups in the county. They've related to modern architecture and related to different themes of Guilford County architectural designs and architectural themes. Tonight we've got a real treat because we're going to go in depth with mid-century modern architecture related to the civil rights era and primarily Black architects and artists. So Eric Woodard is with us tonight. He is currently a board member of Preservation Greensboro, and he has been on our board now for approaching 6 years. And I met Eric many years ago when he was just beginning, it seems, that to develop an interest in modern architecture and modern furniture and trying to understand that. At the same time, I was scratching my head and trying to understand it as well. So we have kind of learned about Greensboro's mid-century modern, especially related to African-American architects side by side. And it has been a fascinating journey, as you'll learn tonight. You'll benefit from years of research that Eric has investigated different personalities and different places, and all with the bottom line of better interpreting our built environment related to the civil rights era and recognizing that Guilford County and Greensboro is a special place and that we have amazing resources here that that we need to take care of and that we can better understand and that we can preserve. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the torch along to Eric Woodard, Mr. Modern, and I look forward to hearing the most recent version of his interpretation of mid-century modern architecture in Greensboro. Thanks, Eric, for being with us tonight.
You are very welcome, Benjamin. I'm a little overwhelmed, but but I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all and with the viewers on mid-century modern architecture, what I've discovered, uncovered here, particularly with Greensboro and East Greensboro. I kind of term it the neighborhoods along South Benbow Road. That's the area that we're focusing on. Although I will be giving an overview of modernism in Greensboro in general, and then focusing on the neighborhoods, the area of South Benbow Road and the Black or African American architects that actually contributed amazingly to the built environment of that area with amazing mid-century modern design. And I guess we will get started. All right, the title, Building Greensboro, Foundations of Our Diverse Mid-Century Modern History. Benjamin mentioned the diversity that's a part of this, and I will show you a little bit of that as well as we move through the presentation. So, mid-century modern. What is mid-century modern? And we have an overview. Basically, it's dealing with clean lines, architectural style that's dealing with clean lines, bold colors, spaces connected to nature, open floor plans, and utilizing a new post-war technology, World War II technology. And most of the photos that you'll see are, if it's someone's house or business, it will have their information there. And this actually is the Evelyn and John Hyman house. Ed Lowenstein designed this, and it was built in '59. Again, just an overview. The mid-century modern movement in the US was an American reflection of the radically new architectural trends found in the international and Bauhaus movements. And that includes the works of Walter Gropius, folks like Florence Snow, Le Corbusier, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. And in 1919, Walter Gropius founded Bauhaus, which was a German design school whose edict was, and you probably have heard this, less is more. And he espoused the principles that design should be both functional and aesthetically pleasing. He came to the US along with some others around that same time period in 1934, fleeing Nazi Germany. And he eventually joined the architectural faculty at Harvard, where he actually introduced Bauhaus principles to America. And though the American component, what we came up with, the style and the flair that we added was a bit more organic in form and a bit less formal than the international style. The American component, or our style, is more closely related to the international style, which was the first movement in modern architecture that embraced functionality, simple forms, clean lines, and open spaces. It emerged in concert with Gropius and Bauhaus, and takes advantage of the new technology, again, the post-World War II technology, such as structural steel, reinforced concrete, and glass. Now, this book, Mid-Century Modern by Kara Greenberg, was published in the '70s. And in it, she's credited with coining the term mid-century modern. Now, while mid-century modern originally targeted the years 1945 through '65, since Greenberg's book was published over 30 years ago, and I kind of espouse this as well, the design period has often stretched to include the late '60s and early to mid '70s. Now, the post-war design trends turned to a lot more organic shapes and vibrant colors for furnishings for a lot of the new homes that were built after World War II. And these homes took full advantage of the materials and technology developed during the war years. And this is the Francis and Edward Lowenstein house, built in 1954. Now, designers and those who love this new style of design look more for balance in their homes between its function and its design. These new homes utilize, as you see here in the photo, the post and beam construction that open the interiors, enabling unencumbered movement within the space. And expansive exterior walls made of glass. You had clear story windows. If you'll look in the right of the photo, upper right, you have the clear story windows that are shown there. And to the left of the photo, the expansive walls of glass, which actually let the outdoors in. Now, the lines were blurred between indoor and outdoor living spaces with patio and pool spaces that took into consideration the surrounding landscape and views. Other popular elements included slate, concrete floors, decorative outdoor ground coverings, warm colors such as muted orange, chartreuse, turquoise, and the use of furniture and decorative features to enhance the modern appeal. This would become mid-century modern architecture as we know it. We'll take a look at mid-century modern Greensboro. And I had a question because of the many different mid-century modern buildings, commercial and residential in Greensboro. I had a question. I said, what was it about Greensboro that enabled the mid-century modern architecture to take a foothold here? And it basically boiled it down to a more progressive, inclusive culture stemming from the very cornerstones of Greensboro's foundation. And some of those cornerstones, I'll talk about in just a moment, but Guilford County, a little bit about how Guilford County came about. It was carved out of parts of Rowan and Orange counties back in 1771. And the county seat moved in 1808 from Martinsville, originally named Guilford Courthouse, which was in the northwest part of the county, to what is geographic center of the county now, which was originally 42 acres of woodlands, which is now our downtown. Now, some of the foundations that contributed to that open, more progressive environment in early Greensboro were the Quakers. They came to Greensboro. One of the first Quaker settlements in present-day Guilford County was New Garden, now called Guilford College, and that was in the 1750s. But the Quakers came with a traditional social cooperation, opposition to slavery, religious tolerance. They also instituted the Underground Railroad. And one of the Levi Coffin within the New Garden member or group of Quakers actually helped through the Underground Railroad that had a stop here in Guilford at Guilford College, helped hundreds, if not thousands, of enslaved people escape to the north and into Canada in some instances as well. Another of the foundations that led to a more progressive environment was the Jewish community. And many supported the civil rights movements and participated even in the fight to end policies of segregation and Jim Crow, and advocated for equal rights. And the first permanent Greensboro settlers arrived in the mid-1890s. And some of those were members of the Cone and Shipman families. Now, Greensboro saw rapid growth during the decade of the 1890s as industrialization transformed the U.S. and North Carolina. As mentioned, Quakers helped nurture a welcoming environment in early Greensboro. They, along with the populations of Presbyterians, Methodists, and Lutherans, who were foundational for a lot of our institutions, particularly the African-American institutions, helped to make Greensboro one of the more tolerant places in the South. This mindset of civic responsibility and tolerance helped to lay that groundwork for the acceptance of that unconditional architectural style, mid-century modernism, that was to come. There were additional foundations that contributed to that mindset, and that was our colleges and universities. Greensboro was ahead of many cities in the South in placing emphasis on higher education for both women and African Americans. By 1837, the Quakers in the New Garden community had formed a boarding school that's today known as Guilford College. It was the first coeducational institution in the South. So Greensboro has a lot of Souths, a lot of firsts, even as it relates to education and the education of women, the education of African Americans, and again, that just lends to that more progressive attitude. And in 1838, Greensboro Female College, now known as Greensboro College, was established in the city. Other institutions opened their halls exclusively to females, including Bennett Seminary, now Bennett College, and that was in 1873. And that, of course, was a school for African American women. And the Normal and Industrial School for White Girls, which is now the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, that was established in 1891. And then you have the Agricultural and Mechanical College for the Colored Race, which was established in 1891 as well, which is now North Carolina A&T, your Agricultural and Technical State University, which is today the largest historically African American school in the nation. Now, all of those different cornerstones, parts of the foundations of Greensboro, had their roles to play in shaping who we were to become as a city, progressive in our thinking, willing to embrace the change, and looking forward to greater things in the mid-20th century. Now let's take a look at how things unfolded just after World War II. That's when Greensboro began to experience great growth in both population and economics. Companies were locating their headquarters here. And it was during that time that very notable examples of modern architecture were being built in North Carolina. And here's just a sampling of some of the local modernist buildings that came out of that period of prosperity. We have the Container Corporation of America building, that was on East Market Street. And Walter Gropius, the founder of Bauhaus, designed that building, built in basically 44 through 46. The Ellis Stone Department Store, now the Elm Street Center. I'm sure you're familiar with that. The company that designed that particular location, it was a New York-based firm, and is known as, basically they had a hand in designing the 1939 World's Fair complex in New York. Wachovia Building, now Central Point, designed by Odell and Associates, built in '66. Odell and Associates were instrumental in Greensboro's corporate architecture. If you remember the Burlington Industries headquarters on Friendly, and also the Syngenta campus on 40, all designed by Odell and Associates. Now, the Greensboro Government Complex, which is an impressive series of buildings. And in the late 1960s and early 70s, it took about 10 years to actually build the complex. But the Argentine architect, Eduardo Catalano, designed the city county government building in a style known as brutalist modern architecture. And as you can see by the photo, this style of architecture utilizes structural concrete and placed with the contrast between mass and space. And he studied, he actually was an instructor. I'm a graduate of the School of Design at NC State, and he was an instructor well before my time there, but with that, at the School of Design for about 5 years, a long time ago. Well, I guess I shouldn't say it like that, should I? And this was the Federal Home Loan Building Bank of Greensboro. Cameron Little and Associates designed this, and that was built in 1970. I've always had an affinity for this building. It's just really, really impressive to me. Now, from the mid to late 40s, let's fast forward a decade or two and walk with me through the streets of Greensboro. Everyday modernism, who knew? These were buildings and structures that we may pass every day, and you know, may or may not have recognized them as modernism, and some of the structures, their particular roles in civil rights and civil rights movement. Cumberland Office Building, designed by Jenkins, and now I'll get into a little bit more of that. Some I attribute a little later in the presentation, but some I don't, so I can give you some of that information now. He had his offices in that building, the Greensboro National Bank building, and this is its original location. It was a bank that was founded by Chief Justice Henry Fry, and some of his associates. And again, the building is still there. It's now Farmers and Mechanics and Farmers Bank now, I think. Hargett Funeral Services on Market, and just as a note, Jenkins designed the building that we just saw, and Clinton Gravely designed the Hargett Funeral Services. Again, we pass by these buildings every day. The Greensboro Public Library, now Elon University Law School, designed by Ed Lowenstein. Churches, again, additional buildings that we pass by every day and may or may not have recognized them as mid-century modern. St. Matthew's United Methodist on MLK, designed by Jenkins. The William Street House, of course, designed by William Street. Evelyn and John Hyman House on Kimberly, designed by Lowenstein. The J. Kenneth Lee House on Broad, designed by Jenkins. Fannie and Charles Fountain House, designed by Gray. Norman Curtis House, designed by Clinton Gravely. Catherine and Sidney Stern House, designed by Lowenstein. Now, these are all stunning examples of mid-century modern or modernist architecture, sprinkled liberally around the city, but who knew the backstory of their diverse beginnings and their role in the civil rights movement? And introducing the foundations of our diverse mid-century modern history. Now, these 6 men, and at present they are all men, and there were some females that worked with Lowenstein, actually, and I'll go into a little bit of that with the commencement houses. But Blue Jenkins, you have William Guppel, of course, Edward Lowenstein, Clinton Gravely, Gerard Gray, and William Streat. And I'll give you some background information on these gentlemen and some of the work that they did here in Greensboro. How did it begin? unconventional sensibility. Edward Lowenstein, he was a Chicago native, is credited with helping to redefine the modern face of Greensboro. And around the time that he came to Greensboro in 49, I believe, or 45 or 49, I'll be able to confirm that. But he, around that same time, the post-war period is when the modernist mindset, zeitgeist, if you will, was forming in the U.S. And so we also have to, and I didn't put a slide in here, but we would also have to give kudos to the architectural engineering department at North Carolina A&T State University for the architects that they graduated during that same time had a similar mindset of modernism, and particularly as an African-American architects, the post-war period was a time of looking forward and progress, and for lack of a better term, the can-do attitude. And it was a mindset that was I would say prevalent, and some of the architects that I showed you earlier, they actually worked with Lowenstein, and again I'll go into that a little further with you, but that mindset, though, I think was a mindset that was pervasive among creatives during that time period. The mindset of the mid-century modern, that style of architecture. Now, Lowenstein graduated from MIT in Cambridge in 35 with a BA in architecture. He's worked in Chicago or Illinois. Once upon graduation, started his own firm there. Actually came to Greensboro in 45 after meeting and marrying Frances Stern, which is the stepdaughter of Julius Cone. Started his practice here in Greensboro in 46 and joined with Robert Atkinson in 53. And later they took on a partner, Walter T. Wilson. So the firm's name changed again, Lowenstein, Atkinson, and Wilson. And up until his untimely death in the 1970, Lowenstein's firm designed around 1,600 buildings. Most were commercial, about 500 residences, and of those, only about 50 were modernist in design. Now, although these were the fewest of his designs, his modernist buildings seemed to more closely reflect that unconventional thinking of a man who embraced diversity. He was also an active member of Governor Terry Sanford's North Carolina Commission on Civil Rights. This is the Lowenstein home, again built in 1954. And again, the post and beam construction, clear story windows, the open floor plan even. And this is the carport that was part of with the cantilevered carport, which in an interview with his daughter, Jane Levy, she was saying that Ed loved hanging out in this space. One of his first modernist building was the Martha and Wilbur Lee House, building 51. You'll notice the solar cell room in the photo, and notice the glass roof and screened exterior walls. Now, Lowenstein came up with a hybrid house as well, which was basically a mixture between the more traditional architecture, residential architecture, and modernism. You see the larger the windows, and a lot of the houses actually had walls of glass on the back side, where the front side looked a little bit more traditional than your standard mid-century modern or modernist house. And this is a building I'm sure most Greensboro-onians, folks who live in Greensboro, most of those are familiar with this building. Before it was the Elon Law School, it was the Greensboro Library. Again, Lowenstein designed this building, and Gregory Ivy, who was the founder of the UNCG Art School and the father of modernist art in North Carolina, did the elaborate design work above the entryway at the library. Yeah, definitely worth walking through and taking a look at that. Now, this photo was given to me by Major Sanders, who was a graduate, I believe in '71, of the architectural engineering program at A&T. He worked with, he never worked with Lowenstein, but he did work with Jenkins. But this, in this photo, you have Sanders on the right, the white jacket, you have Lowenstein standing in the middle. But these are architectural engineering students from the program at North Carolina A&T State, and they're standing in the library during construction. Now, Lowenstein was a forward thinker regarding teaching architectural practices to women. Not only had architecture been predominantly a white endeavor, but it had been predominantly a male endeavor as well. And Lowenstein actually at UNC, well, Women's College at the time, he taught a class on, the first class was 23 interior design, home economics students. And they were to research and design a house, and that house would be built. And the first commencement house was in 1958. And this is a photo of the backside of the house. It was, you know, it was a very big deal. It was actually featured in McCall's magazine and a number of other publications. There were a total of 3 houses. This was the second, built in 1959. And the third built in 1965. Now, Lowenstein's unconventional thinking was also exercised or expressed through his firm as the first white firm in North Carolina to hire African-American architects. And one of the first, it was either Gupple or Jenkins, depending on who you asked and the information that you might find. Jenkins was first or Gupple was first, but both were graduates from A&T, the architectural engineering program, in 1949. Both Jenkins and Gupple were graduates there. And so again, one of the two was the first of 2 hired. And unfortunately, there is not too much information that we have on Gupple at this time. He spent most of his career actually in New York. Now, these 3 men all worked with Lowenstein early in their careers. Edward Jenkins worked with Lowenstein from 1949 through '61. William Streat worked just a couple years as a structural consultant from '50 to '52, and Clinton Gravely worked with him from '61 to '67. In this photo, you'll see Jenkins standing in the middle with the white jacket, Clinton Gravely over to the right, kind of in the last row. And then there's a gentleman, Lonnie Moore, who standing to the far left beside Lowenstein. He ran the blue line machine. Of course, Gravely and Jenkins were architects hired by Lowenstein. And again, that was unheard of at the time they were hired, particularly Edward Jenkins, given that he was hired in '49. Now, were you able to hear that? I'm not 100% sure. Okay, that was a quote from Jane Levy. I did an interview with her in 2016, and my question was, how did your father feel about taking a chance on hiring the African American architects? And her response, if you were able to hear it there, was that he didn't feel like he was taking a chance. He was just looking for the right people for the job. And I thought that was really, really telling of who Ed Lowenstein was. Now introducing the African-American architects who forged their unique legacies. And basically what we'll cover, most of what we'll cover, are their works, residential and commercial, in the neighborhoods along South Benbow Road. And in this map, you'll see some of the houses, and there's still, the research is ongoing. So I'm sure this is not a comprehensive list of the houses that were designed by each of the 4 architects here. And I look forward to continuing to uncover more information and the connections regarding these architects, this area of Greensboro, and civil rights. We'll start with Edward Jenkins, who actually, as I mentioned, graduated from the architectural engineering program in '49, of course, A&T, and is noted as one of the first two African-American architects to work for a white firm, Lowenstein's firm here in North Carolina. He worked with Lowenstein from '49 to '61. In 1953, while at Lowenstein's, Jenkins became the third registered Black architect in North Carolina after Gaston Alonzo Edwards and William Streat. In '62, Jenkins started his own firm. It actually, at that point, it became the first in the state to be run by an African-American registered architect. Jenkins favored modernist designs and innovation, and his work fulfilled the desire of many Black clients to have that modernist buildings expressive of progress. Again, that post-World War II mindset of modernism, looking forward. And per noted architectural historian Jennifer Martin, Jenkins and others saw modernist designs as a new beginning and a symbol of the promise that the future held for African Americans in the segregated South. He and his primarily Black clients shared a preference for modernist identification, with advancement rather than the past. Now, one of Jenkins' most well-known buildings is the Dudley Gymnasium, high school gymnasium, and this was built in 1959. And the gym was recognized for its innovative structures, incorporating massive steel arches that formed the main support for the building's intersection of roof arches. Now, that technology, was new for the time, but was pretty uncommon for educational facilities. And again, it won a number of awards, including the National Association of School Architects. They chose a scale model of the gym to display at their annual conference when it was built. The year it was built in '59. The American Institute of Steel Construction awarded Dudley High School Gym with one of 12 architectural awards of excellence for outstanding aesthetic and design structural steel. And this is what the gym looks like today. Now, modernism is equal to progress for African Americans. Jenkins' daughter, Miltrine Jenkins Barton, stated in an interview that her father's role in designing the gym made the whole community proud. It was unheard of in those days, she said, for Black men to do work like that. Now, Jenkins designed homes for many prominent African American residents of East Greensboro. He also did several buildings on the campus of North Carolina A&T State University, including the Ron McNair College of Engineering building, which we'll see in just a moment. Now, he did some amazing residences as well in the South Benbow Road area. And this is the home of J. Kenneth Lee, which was built in '59. And I'll go into a lot more detail regarding Lee and his place in civil rights in just a few moments. And this is the Bishop Wyoming Wells House. The current owners are Justice Henry and Shirley Fry, designed by Jenkins and built in '59. Some of his commercial buildings, again, the Greensboro National Bank building, and that was built in '74. Cumberland office building, Jenkins had his first offices in this building, along with some other Black professionals. And the Ron McNair engineering building on the campus of A&T. One of the most impressive spiritual buildings, churches that Jenkins designed was St. Matthew's United Methodist on MLK, and that was built in 1970. Now, the next architect that we'll take a quick look at is William Streat. He actually began his career as professor of architectural engineering at A&T, started in '49. He actually worked until '85 when he retired. And a lot of first accreditation came through on his watch. The department just exploded in faculty and student enrollment, and even endowments. Now, Streat earned bachelor's degrees from Hampton Institute, University of Illinois. Education was really big for him. He completed additional studies at Duke University, University of California, and Columbia. He also earned a MS in architectural engineering from MIT as well. Remember, Lowenstein actually earned a degree from architectural engineering from MIT. Streat also served in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers during World War II and was actually a Tuskegee Airman. In '52, he became the second registered African-American architect in North Carolina. Of course, Gaston Alonzo Edwards was the first, nearly 40 years earlier. Streat was also the second African-American architect to join the North Carolina chapter of the AIA. Ed Jenkins was the first. This poster lists some of the students that graduated from the Architectural and Engineering Department from '42 to 1990. And these are the architects that I'll be talking about in this presentation as champions of mid-century modern architecture here in Greensboro. And this is a photo of William Streat and his wife on campus with a student. And this is a Streat house designed by William Streat and built in '62. He also designed the Frank and Gladys White house, built in '65, and this is on East Side Drive. The Dr. Flotilla and Eloise Watkins house was built in '63. And there's a lot of history with the people that these houses were built for. These were, again, African-American professionals, doctors, dentists, and the like. Now, the next architect we'll take a look at is Clinton Gravely, a Reidsville native, worked with his father and grandfather, who were contractors before he attended Howard University in 1955 to study architecture. After returning from Howard, he worked with Lowenstein, again, from '61 to '67. He was the third African-American architect to work with Lowenstein. He actually replaced William Gupple, who was leaving the firm at the time. Now in '67, Gravely opened his own firm with Lowenstein's blessing. Gravely recounted in a 2016 interview that when the clients of a project he was working on at Lowenstein's found out that he was leaving, they actually wanted to go with him, and they wanted him to take the project, and which was a shopping center. And Lowenstein agreed. It wasn't an issue with Lowenstein, just again, given the person that he was. And he also seeded Gravely's fledgling firm with another project that was fallout shelters. Gravely actually was the main designer of fallout shelters at Lowenstein. Now from there, when asked about the social climate in the '60s for hers, the family of an African-American architect, Mrs. Gravely, basically said that how they were living their lives similar to those of most African-American families, with a few work-related exceptions. And the one that stands out to me was, as an architect, once the project is finished, they got a lot of invitations to some of the residences that the Gravely's firm had designed. And there was one in particular she'd mentioned that the folks had a pool. So they were there, but she said she never got in the pool. So now over the years, Gravely and Associates designed over 900 projects, including over 100 churches, and the North Carolina A&T State University's Guilford Library. Now this is a Gravely home. It took nearly 3 years to build and nearly a year to design. The entryway and the door that you see in the photo on the left is crafted in Mexico. It's a custom oak door that complemented the stone both on the walls and on the floor. I had an glassed-in atrium that separated the dining area from the living room. Photo of the living room. Open concept kitchen. And an incredible bedroom, master bedroom. And the house was built in 4 wings, with the kitchen area basically connecting the 4 different wings. Everything was on one level with the exception of the recreation room, which was downstairs and pretty much in the basement. There's also a multi-purpose building on the property. Another house that he designed was the Trellis House, and this was built in 1970. The Norman Curtis House that we saw a little earlier, built in 1967, and Providence Baptist Church, built in 67 as well. Shiloh Baptist, which was built in 74. One unique thing other than the design, or in addition to the design, was that the stained glass was actually designed by Eva Miller, who was an African-American artist who also lived in the South Benbow Road area of Greensboro. She was responsible for some of the stained glass at Bennett College and at a number of other facilities, St. Matthew's, United Methodist Church, or also she did the stained glass for that location. The Buford Library, designed by Bradley, built in 91. Gerard Gray is the next architect we'll take a look at, born in Cheraw. He actually graduated from the architectural engineering, or from A&T State University in 42. He actually got his architectural engineering degree a little later from the University of Illinois. That was in 49. Did some postgraduate studies at Penn State, University of Illinois, and Colorado. Again, education was tantamount to these gentlemen. Now, Gray moved back to Greensboro in 54 or 53 to become an associate professor at A&T. He did some design work on his own, starting in 61, but also was a draftsman for Greensboro architect Thomas Heritage. He never worked with Lowenstein, but he also did some work with Jenkins. Now, during his stint as an architect, Gray designed houses for A&T professors and prominent African-American community and business leaders. This is the Fannie and Charles Fountain House across from A&T. The Joe and Eunice Dudley House, built in 72. And the Dr. Alvin and Gwendolyn Blunt House, built in 64. And I'll give you a bit more information on this house and the and Dr. Blunt a little later in the presentation. The Eugene and Lorena Morrow House, built in 68. And the last two houses, the Blunt House and the Morrow House, are all in this area of along South Benbow Road. This is East Side Drive. And Dr. Melvin Alexander House. Now, modernism's role in civil rights in East Greensboro and the neighborhoods along South Benbow Road. I've given you a pretty extensive background or overview of modernism, modernist architecture in Greensboro. I've given you some background on some of the African-American architects that were responsible for a lot of that, particularly in East Greensboro. And now we're going to see how all of that jives and ties in with the civil rights movement. Now, mid-century modern provided the backdrop. Now, this church, the Episcopal Church of the Redeemer, became, under the leadership of Father Richard Hicks, headquarters for CORE, which was the Congress of Racial Equity, made up mostly of Bennett and A&T students during the civil rights movement. And this structure was designed by William Streat and built in 56. As recorded in this photo from 1963, that was captured in the Greensboro News and Record. Young Reverend Jesse Jackson on the right here was arrested without incident from the Episcopal Church of the Redeemer for leading a protest march against segregation in the streets of downtown Greensboro the day before. And the law to desegregate lunch counters was actually passed the very next year. So a lot of the facilities, a lot of even the homes in this area of Greensboro, as I started to do research and look into that more, I was fascinated and really blown away by the amount of history, both cultural, civil rights, academic, all even like public service history that came out of the small area of Greensboro. The Providence Baptist Church, again designed by Clinton Gravely, played a role in the civil rights movement in Greensboro, providing office space and safe haven for students to meet and plan their demonstrations and marches. And this was in '67. Now, Dr. Alvin and Gwendolyn Blunt House, again built in '64, and a little bit more information on Dr. Blunt. He gained experience breaking barriers when he actually served in Korea, the first racially integrated MASH unit, as its first Black chief surgeon. He actually, if you remember the MASH TV show, he was actually called as a consultant for that show as well. And he received the Korean War Service Medal for his efforts there. Now, after returning to private practice here in Greensboro, he was the first African-American in North Carolina to be certified by the American College of Abdominal Surgeons. This was in '57. And he practiced at Kindred Hospital, which was formerly the L. Richardson Hospital, which has a lot of history of its own in that area of East Greensboro. He was the last living litigant of the suit Simpkins versus Moses H. Cone Hospital, which was litigated in '63, which was a landmark Supreme Court decision that desegregated hospitals throughout the South and from there throughout the nation, radically changed medicine as they knew it then. Now, Dr. Blunt became the first Black surgeon admitted to the medical staff at Moses Cone Hospital as well, and this was in '64, and the first to perform surgery at Moses Cone. And again, even as I go tell you about and share this information with you, my mind goes back to all in this small area of East Greensboro. Now, on September 15th, 2016, Cone Hospital apologized to Dr. Blunt, who again was the last living plaintiff in that lawsuit. Cone also gave a $250,000 scholarship honoring Dr. Blunt and the other plaintiffs. Now, another civil rights icon for Greensboro and actually nationally as well is J. Kenneth Lee, Attorney Lee. And this is his house designed by Ed Jenkins on Broad Street there, and those neighborhoods along South Benbow Road. Now, Attorney Lee became, after a lengthy lawsuit in 1951, one of the first two African-American students and graduates at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill Law School. Attorney Lee was legal counsel for over 1,700 civil rights lawsuits, including suits to integrate public elementary and secondary schools in North Carolina. Gillespie Park Elementary was one of those. And he defended students who began the sit-in movements in Greensboro. Now, at his home, we were again talking about the civil rights movement. Folks like Martin Luther King, when he came through Greensboro, actually stayed at the Attorney Lee's home. And also folks like Thurgood Marshall also were visitors to Attorney Lee's home during the civil rights era. In addition to his civil rights activities, Attorney Lee was also a businessman who founded or helped to establish shopping centers, a nursing facility, rental and commercial property enterprises, and American Federal Savings and Loan, the state's first Black federally chartered savings and loan association. Basically, I've talked with people who know the story of the founding of the savings and loan, and he had been basically, when he went to traditional banks, he was only offered $13,000 at the time to build his house, and that wasn't enough. So instead of going back and forth or anything, he and a group of African-American business people, clergy, who were prominent in the community as well, decided to open their own, build their own, start their own. And again, being the first Black federally chartered savings and loan association in North Carolina. Now, another first, and this is the Bishop Wyoming Wells House. The current occupants, again, are Chief Justice Henry Fry and Shirley Fry. And But Bishop Wyoming Wells came to Greensboro in the late 30s, and in 41, he became pastor of what is now Wells Memorial Kojic, or Church of God in Christ. He was a preacher and an entrepreneur and presided over the church for 34 years, making a huge impact on the community. Among other firsts, the church made history during the summer of 1946 when it started the first radio church ministry by a Black Greensboro congregation. And now the current owners of the Bishop Wyoming Wells House, again, Chief Justice Fry and Shirley Fry. A little bit about Chief Justice Fry. He was born in Richmond County in 32. He graduated with top honors from North Carolina A&T State University, became a U.S. Air Force captain. Despite his education, which is a really interesting story, despite his education and service, he was told he had failed the required literacy test when he returned home and attempted to register to vote in 1956. The experience inspired him to become a lawyer. Now, in talking with Mrs. Fry, another thing that helped him to choose law, because he'd gone to school to be a dentist. And another thing that helped him to become an attorney was talking with attorney Kenneth Lee, who suggested, why would you want to be a dentist? You should be an attorney. And according to Mrs. Fry, very soon after, they went back to UNC, Chapel Hill, and he talked with the deans there and he changed his major. Now, in 62, Robert Kennedy appointed him as an assistant U.S. attorney, which was he was one of only 6 in the nation. And in 68, Chief Justice Fry became the first African-American elected to the North Carolina General Assembly in the 20th century. The first bill that he introduced, ironically, was a constitutional amendment abolishing the literacy test. And he eventually served 6 terms in the State House and 1 term in the State Senate before he began his judicial career. February 3rd, 1983, he was sworn in as North Carolina's first African-American Supreme Court Justice. Governor Jim Hunt appointed him as an associate justice. And then in 99, in another first, Governor Hunt named him to the unexpired term of retiring Chief Justice Burley Mitchell. And Chief Justice Fry retired in 2000 after serving on the state's top tribunal for more than 17 years. Now, members of both the Jewish and Quaker faiths were active in local politics in mid-century Greensboro and had been elected as mayors in the city. This political and social context is thought by some historians to have provided agency in the city's Black population, encouraging some from the Black community to also explore opportunities to affect change through politics. And one such person was Dr. William Hampton. Dr. Hampton, a respected physician, was elected in 1951 as Greensboro's first Black City Council member. He also, tying it into South Benbow Road area, also built a house designed by Edward Jenkins on Ross Avenue. So many people, and I'm continuing to do the research, and every time I talk with someone, they give me another person who did a first in Greensboro and also lived in the area, and in a lot of cases lived in houses designed by either Jenkins or Streat or Gray. And Gravely actually did some work, additions and the like, for some of the houses that were already established in that area. Now, I've presented just a brief overview of significant cultural and architectural history of the neighborhoods along South Benbow Road. There have been many other firsts in these neighborhoods, tying mid-century modern architecture to civil rights movement in Greensboro. There have been firsts in, as doctors, lawyers, civil servants. There have been first in the arts, the creative side. There have been first if it is something to do academia, first there. It blows my mind. It overwhelms me sometimes just to think about the amazing history and cultural significance of that, again, that small area. in the neighborhoods along South Benbow Road. Each neighborhood has its own identity, its own persona, and its own impact, on the history of not only Greensboro but North Carolina and the nation. Now, I'm still researching the architect, but civil rights activist Jabril Ghazan, who's Azell Blair, one of the Greensboro Four, who started the sit-in movements in Greensboro, lived in a mid-century modern ranch on South Benbow Road. And again, I'm still looking into who the architect was, but again, these are just a few of the amazing, the people and their stories are captivating, and they're insightful. And these are things that information that, the stories of their lives and their homes, the architects, the architecture, all of this, is things, information that I feel, should be widely known, not only, just Greensboro, but, beyond Greensboro as well. And again, so many more stories like this to uncover. And I welcome you to walk with us along this amazing journey of discovery. And that will be it.
Well, thank you, Eric. That was, as I expected, this was an incredibly thorough and up-to-date review of what we've learned. And for those of you that might not be, might have the experience in Greensboro's historic preservation movement, we started in about 2005 with the Lowenstein Legacy.
Yes.
Was followed in 2013 by a follow-up Lowenstein Legacy, and that just began. We just began to pull that thread, and Lowenstein led to Jenkins, and Jenkins led to A&T, and A&T led to South Benbow Road, and South Benbow Road is leading to other themes, different churches in the community, different artists now that we're learning about, because these group of architects also worked in the same program or sister programs at A&T and Bennett, with artists, female artists that contributed in terms of fashion. And you talked about stained glass. So,
Yes.
Greensboro is a city of neighborhoods, and I think that we could safely say that what I call the golden triangle between Bennett College, Dudley High School, and A&T is really a remarkable place in its contributions to our state and the civil rights era architecture. And just to bring a sort of a news update for everybody, we have had a study that was commissioned by the city and the State Historic Preservation Office and funded through government to review some of these sites to better understand what we have in this golden triangle. South Benbow Road. That is now evolving into another phase, which is to recognize the individual buildings and maybe some of the neighborhoods to the National Register, which of course is an honor to have those neighborhoods recognized. We have many neighborhoods in the city that are recognized to the National Register, but this would be one of the first in the state really to celebrate modern architecture. And so this journey continues to evolve on. Eric, if my question to you is, if somebody's really been energized by learning all this that you've just shared with us, how's a good way for them to plug in and help?
Okay, well, if they have stories about any of the people or the places in the area, we are doing oral histories, recording oral histories as a part of the National Register application. So they can contact me or Preservation of Greensboro, and you've been great for forwarding information and people's names and information, contact info to me. So definitely feel free to contact me, and we can get something scheduled for you. The oral histories don't have to be in person, given everything. They can be recorded via phone call or even Zoom. Mm-hmm. And so that's one way. And we are looking to, we're actively pursuing and seeking people who are willing to have their oral histories recorded as it relates to the area. And it's funny that you mentioned that triangle. I got some information today that Azelle Blair Sr. was actually an instructor, I think art instructor or industrial arts instructor at Dudley High School. So I was just thrilled to get that information. So, but that's another rabbit hole that we're going to be going down, and we'll have to add him
Just
to
builds and builds.
it does.
So,
really.
so if you maybe you know somebody through church, or you know somebody through work that might know some background story, or maybe have some connections to residents in this area, to contact us and let us know, because Eric is learning more about this literally every day. So,
Yes.
well, Eric, thank you for taking the time to share this amazing story. It is certainly one that everybody from Guilford County can be super proud of. This is a story with statewide implications, regional implications, perhaps even national implications, national contributions to our culture and history. So we will all work hard to continue that momentum forward. And we look forward to our next talk, which will be in September, to continue our series on Guilford at 250. In closing, I will say happy birthday to Guilford County, and thanks again to Eric for your incredible presentation and all of your research and work. Thanks so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Bye, everybody. Bye.